Everyone, Oli here, and this is my review of Enlightenment, the fifth story of the 20th season of classic Doctor Who, starring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor. Enlightenment is the 128th story overall, it's 4 parts long, and it's written by Barbara Clegg. Enlightenment is also the final installment of the Black Guardian Trilogy, so the plot of Enlightenment is as follows. Materializing on an Edwardian sailing yacht, the Doctor and his companions find themselves caught up in a mysterious and deadly race. The prize is enlightenment, the wisdom to find your heart's desire, and it quickly becomes clear that one of the crews will let nothing and no one stop them claiming victory. As the Black Guardian pressures Turlo into completing his side of the murderous pact, it seems that the Doctor may not survive to cross the finish line. So that is the plot of Enlightenment. I personally think that Enlightenment is a fun, brilliant story. When I first watched the story during the first lockdown, which was a very long time ago, I wasn't too thrilled with it, but then rewatching it now, I would have to say that it is definitely one of the best stories in the Peter Davison era. There are some faults that do prevent Enlightenment from being a perfect 10 out of 10, but it's still very passable though, it's still very enjoyable. I think the story had a very good production. I think the sets and model work looked amazing. All the ships, especially, there were ships from the Edwardian era and they were all in space, which was very clever. The ships themselves looked really stunning, and I admired the effort that went behind the making of the story. Though the ships looked all very similar, especially Strecker and Rack ship, but I did love the soundtrack. They did have a very whimsical pirate adventure feel to it, which was exactly what this story was, a whimsical pirate adventure in space. The special effects were right, questionable in some places, such as Turlo jumping off Stryker's ship and him floating in space, but this was the 80s, so I'll overlook it, and somehow the special edition of that was released in 2009 made this moment even worse. The script by Fiona Cumming was the script was quite good, and the direction by Fiona Cumming was quite good as well. And I think this is one of the very first instances. I think it was an all-female writing and directing team. So yeah, fair play to them. The plot was quite good. The race to enlightenment was a great idea, and I liked the idea of having the Eternals making the Doctor Who debut, taking humans from that specific time period they were from and using them for the race, which is very similar to the War Games, in which the villains were abducting humans from different wars and putting them in situations and prepping them for a possible invasion. The idea of the Eternals was inspired by Barbara Clegg's experience, as she had wealthy relatives who wanted to be entertained, and other family members were seen as lesser beings. There was also some other biblical aspects of the story as well, like the prize of enlightenment was basically taken from the tree of knowledge in the book of Genesis. The concept of the Eternals was quite interesting. It was also quite interesting. They weren't. I wouldn't say they're gods, so to speak. They're beings that pretty much exist outside the space and time, and pretty much used anyone and anything that weren't them as their own playthings, and they were called ephemerals. And of course, they had no concept of human emotions because they simply could not understand. Even when they found out that the Doctor's a Time Lord through mind reading, they were actually quite surprised and quite puzzled as to how Time Lords can exist on such a small domain. There were some very good moments in the story, like the part 1 cliffhanger was revealed that everyone was in space and the visuals looked amazing, and the ending was quite fantastic as well. And this is when Turlo was offered enlightenment, but if he had accepted enlightenment, it would come at the cost of the Doctor, but obviously Turlo declined, and then the Doctor revealed that enlightenment was the choice itself, not the actual prize of enlightenment, because Tegan was still untrusting of the Turlo, and I also liked how Frack was introduced in part 3. Very camp, but it was an introduction, so to speak, and the part 3 cliffhanger was quite campy as well, and she was basically where Captain Rack was basically breaking the fourth wall, saying she was going to destroy the Doctor, and broke into a very campy pantomime laugh, so to speak. So onto the performances, and I think they were quite good. Peter Davison, brilliant as always. Now that Nissa is no longer a part of the TARDIS, we have the trio of the Fifth Doctor, Tegan and Turlo. They all have great chemistry together. I would definitely say that this is definitely one of the best three-person TARDIS teams in the show's history. Tegan had great chemistry in Turlo, as was seen in Terminus. Tegan works with the Doctor works with Turlo, so yeah, it's a very good TARDIS team, and they all have very good chemistry together. And there was a humorous scene when, I think it was in part one, when the Doctor and Turlo were exploring the ship, and they met the sailors, and the Doctor introduced themselves, and as if the sailors knew who the Doctor was, but then it turns out that Doctor actually meant cook in their times, and I thought that scene was quite funny, and Turtle would agree with me as well, that he found it quite funny as well. Well, so another moment that I quite liked is when the Doctor realized how Rack was destroying the other Eternal ships by hiding small rubies in objects, and the Doctor found the ruby that was hidden in Tegan's tiara. The Doctor quickly smashed up the ruby, but then it didn't work, so the Doctor had to scoop up the rubies and toss them outside the ship just in the nick of time. And as soon as he tossed them out, it exploded. And I think that the tension was actually very well acted in that scene, and I think Peter Davison got that quite well. My initial complaint was that the Doctor and Tegan didn't explicitly find out about the Turlo's pact with the Black Guardian, but then on the first watch, but then afterwards, after I watched it again, it's still not as explicit, but then I think the Doctor was able to put two and two together along with Tegan, and then they realized that Turlo was going to kill the Doctor, but then the Doctor decides to accept Turlo because he believed that Turlo did not actually want to kill the Doctor. Janet Fielding was great as well. Tegan definitely disliked the Eternals, and and it shows again how disgusted she gets if someone is harming or using the human race in general, and the Eternals did actually freak her out, especially when the Eternals made her remove from aspects from her room in the TARDIS and her room back in Brisbane. She was obviously very uncomfortable with the Eternal Marina, and Fielding was very. She was able to capture the aspect of how uncomfortable Tegan was around Mariner very well, and I liked how Tegan realized how Mariner was actually in love with her, but Mariner, being an Eternal, didn't actually understand the concept of love and human feelings, so he was just in love with her presence, so to speak. Mark Strickson was incredible. I do think that Enlightenment is his best performance as Turlo. The Black Guardian still wanted Turlo to kill the Doctor, but it seemed as if Turlo had accepted the fact that he cannot go ahead and murder the Doctor. Why I think the story is Strickson's best is because he was able to capture how the Black Guardian was able to how the Black Guardian actually affected Turlo's state of mind, and Turlo was very frightened of the Black Guardian, and whenever the Black Guardian would appear, and then the Black Guardian actually condemned Turlo to remain on the ship forever, and he couldn't leave, which pretty much drove him mad, and Turlo pretty much decided to kill himself by throwing himself off the ship, but then he was saved by Rack and her ship, and Rack also served the Black Guardian. He allied himself with her. And there was a scene where I found incredible was when Turlo was trapped in the vacuum room and the Black Guardian was going to have Turlo suffocate to death, and Turlo was screaming for help, and in that scene was quite awesome. I would definitely say that it was definitely a defining scene for him because he's not evil at all. He just simply wanted to go home, and he was made to put for made to he was pretty much had to make the deal with the devil so he was able to go home. But then we actually do find out why he left his home planet later on, more during his time in the TARDIS, and I can tell that Turlo was definitely pleased to be free from the Black Guardian's pressure at the end, where after the Black Guardian is defeated, and it shows that the Doctor bears no ill will towards Turlo, and it's also believed that Turlo wouldn't actually kill the Doctor. So on to the sidecast. I thought they were all very good and they all contributed to the plot. So first off, we had the White Guardian returning for the first time since the Rebus operation, the actual White Guardian. He appears in the TARDIS at the start, warning the Doctor in code that there's danger and the race should not have a winner and winner takes all. He appears at the end with the Black Guardian to award the winner with Enlightenment, and the winner turned out to be Turlo. Although Turlo actually turned it down, afterwards he actually warned the Doctor that After the Black Guardian pretty much disappeared, when the Doctor pretty much stopped the Black Guardian again, he warned the Doctor that the Black Guardian would be back for a third encounter because the Doctor previously denied him the key to time and was able to escape two different assassination attempts with the Black Guardian. So none of it happens on TV, but we do see. I think it does happen in the comics or the expanded media. But yeah, the White Guardian was good here. He's not played by the original actor. I think he's played by another actor here. So yeah. And onto the Eternals, we had Stryker. He was an Eternal that was a captain of the Shadow, his ship, and he was the one that told the Doctor about the Eternals and what and how. And he somewhat aided the Doctor in stopping Rack, his rival. And after the race, he and the other Eternals were removed, and the other sailors were sent back to their own times. And of course, you had Mariner, who was Stryker's first mate, and he had a bit of an obsession with Tegan, and he was very much following her around like a lost puppy. He wasn't in love with her per se, but he was quite fascinated by her, and he was also sent back with the other Eternals. And we have Jackson. He was one of the sailors on board the Shadow, and he warned Turlo on what the Eternals were doing to them, involving Rom and how they pretty much controlled them. He was unaffected because he was a Teotaller and tried to get Turlo to rebel. One of the Eternals sensed this, and he tried to prevent Turlo from killing himself. But then after the Eternals noticed that he wasn't drinking the rum, they didn't actually do anything to them. They just let him be. Initially, I think he was going to disappear after telling Turlo, but then Eric Sayer decided to keep him in the story, realizing that him dying would just be a bit dark for the story. And of course, we had Mansell. He was Rack's first mate. He was an Eternal that served, and I think he was a pop star. I've forgotten his name, and he was thrown overboard by the Doctor and Turlo alongside Rack. So, and on to the villains. First off, we have Captain Rack. She was an Eternal that served the Black Guardian, and she was taking part in the race for eternity. Through lip reading, I actually found out through research. The White Guardian was actually warning the Doctor about her, saying that if she wins the race, it will cause havoc for the entire universe. And she was blowing up her opponents by giving them the gifts that had like a small hidden ruby encrusted in them, and the ruby was a contact point which allowed Rack to channel the darkness within her and destroy the ships. She was a very dangerous villain, and she was defeated when her and her first mate Mansell fell in the hole for a ship, and they didn't die, but they were just simply replaced. She was played by the late Linda Barron, and she was a very campy villain, and she did it quite well, especially in the part 3 cliffhanger when she looked at the camera saying how she was going to destroy the Doctor and had her own evil laugh. And the other villain was the Black Guardian, and this is pretty much the story he actually does become more involved in. After being sidelined in the other two stories, it actually factored into the plot, and he still wants Turlo to kill the Doctor, but Turlo fails once again, and the Black Guardian condemns Turlo to eternity on board the Shadow, and he spends the rest of the story trying to kill Turlo by sucking him into space, strangling him also, and when his plans to kill the Doctor fails, when Turlo declines enlightenment and ends up bursting into flames. He was quite intimidating in the story, aside from the point where he's literally talking to Turlo and literally had his own laugh. It was like he literally went, "Nah." This is in one part of the story. He literally just laughed like that. So on to the faults of the story. I think I found him rather creepy, and I think that was obviously the intent of the story, but it really put me off, and I honestly wish that Tegan kicked him in the balls or something, because I found him too creepy to actually enjoy the story. And another fault I have is I think the Eternals were a bit overpowered, especially with them hearing other non-Eternals' thoughts, and because of this, it made the other characters look quite stupid, especially the Doctor when he wanted to form a plan, but then Rack and the other Eternals heard him, and I think that could have easily been avoided. And another fault I have was the special edition of Enlightenment. This was released in 2009 along with the Enlightenment DVD. It says tried to set out to fix the outdated special effects from 1983. It included new features, and obviously it was looked and obviously it just looked quite weird and it backfired as well. And especially looking at it in 2023, it looked quite shit if you ask me. Firstly, they actually changed the aspect ratio from 4:3, which all Katakuri stories had been broadcast in, to a 16:9 widescreen, which is pretty much the standard for most broadcasts today. Even I think some productions actually use 2:1. I think some still use 16:9, and which this made the picture look really badly elongated, meaning that some aspects might be cut off from the picture, which I do have an issue with because of the because of the picture looking very stretched and elongated. Then it just cut off like certain aspects of the story, just exposing other elements as well. It just doesn't really look very much pretty, so to speak. And the scene where Turlo actually yeets himself off Stryker's ship when he was rescued by Rack also got a CGI update, and that looked very outdated. And the remaster look quite outdated, and because it just looked quite dodgy. So I would definitely recommend watching the 1983 version of Enlightenment, because the 2009 version was just simply just dog shit. So to conclude, I think Enlightenment is a very fun story. I was able to balance the fun with the gravitas the plot had. It was a great way to close the Black Guardian trilogy, and I think, in my opinion, I think because of this, with the story, I think my opinion of the Black Guardian trilogy is actually mellowed, so to speak. So I will give Enlightenment an 8.5 out of 10. My next review will be the season finale of season 20, The King's Demons, which features the return of the Master and the debut of the companion Chameleon. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought of Enlightenment and this review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Click on the bell to be notified on other videos I would post. And I'll see you later. Bye bye.